My husband of 14 years left me for a 26-year-old coworker he met at a work conference in Nashville. I found out by walking into my own kitchen on a random Tuesday and finding her standing at my stove, wearing my apron, cooking in my grandmother's casserole dish, while he sat at my kitchen table watching her like I didn't exist, like I had never existed, like the 14 years and the 2 kids and the house and the dog and every single Sunday dinner I had ever made in that kitchen meant absolutely nothing. That's where the story starts. But that is not where it ends. Because what happened to them, what happened to both of them, I could never have written it myself. And trust me, I tried. In those first weeks I imagined every possible version of karma. Every possible way the universe could balance the scales. None of what I imagined came close to what actually happened. So stay with me, because this story goes places you will not see coming. My name is Sandra. I'm 40 years old. I live in Naperville, Illinois, 4-bedroom colonial, good school district, the kind of neighborhood where the HOA emails you if your grass gets too long and your neighbors wave from their driveways but never actually come inside. I have 2 kids, Tyler, 16, and Maya, 13. I have a golden retriever named Biscuit who sheds on everything I own. I had a vegetable garden in the back that I was genuinely proud of. And I had a husband named Mark, who I had been with for 17 years, married for 14. 14 years. I want you to hold that number, because the affair lasted 8 months. 8 months of him coming home to that house every night, kissing my cheek at the door, sitting at my dinner table, helping Tyler with homework, watching Maya's volleyball games, holding my hand in the car on the way to church on Sunday mornings. 8 months of a whole other life running parallel to mine, and I saw nothing. Not one sign. Not one moment where something felt wrong enough to investigate. And I have asked myself every single day since, how? How did I not know? How does a woman who spent 17 years learning every detail of another person, his moods, his tells, the way his jaw tightens when he's stressed, the exact sound of his breathing when something is wrong, how does that woman miss 8 months of her husband being in love with someone else? I don't have a clean answer. What I have is a Tuesday in October. The kids were in school. I was supposed to spend the afternoon at my sister Diane's place across town. She'd just gotten home from a minor procedure, and I was going to bring her soup, watch bad TV, be the good sister I'd always been. Except Diane called me at noon and said her daughter had driven in from Columbus, and she didn't need me. She said, "Go home, Sandra. Relax, you never do nothing." She was right, so I drove home. I turned onto our street at 12:47 in the afternoon. I remember the time because I looked at the dashboard clock when I saw Mark's car in the driveway. His black Audi, sitting right there in the middle of the day on a Tuesday. My first thought, and I want you to understand this because it tells you everything about where my head was, my first thought was he must be sick. That's what a wife thinks when she trusts her husband completely. She doesn't think affair. She thinks flu. I parked behind him. I grabbed my purse. I was already mentally going through what we had in the pantry that I could make him for lunch. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. And that's when I smelled it. My kitchen, smelled like garlic and rosemary and browning butter. Someone was cooking in my house. I stood in my own doorway for probably 5 full seconds just frozen. Because my brain was trying to do the math, and it didn't add up. Mark doesn't cook. Mark has never once in 17 years turned on the oven unprompted. The man burns toast. He once called me from a hotel room to ask how long to microwave a frozen burrito. So who was cooking in my kitchen? I walked through the living room. I could hear something now, not just the smell. Music. Soft, low, some kind of acoustic playlist coming from the little Bluetooth speaker we keep on the counter. We never play that speaker unless we're cooking together on Saturday mornings. I turned the corner into the kitchen, and there she was, 26 years old, dark hair pulled up in a messy bun, wearing a light blue top I'd never seen before, dark jeans, bare feet on my hardwood floor, wearing my apron, the one that hangs on the hook by the pantry, the red and white striped one my kids gave me for Mother's Day 3 years ago that says Chief Household Officer across the front. She was standing at my stove, stirring something in my grandmother's casserole dish, which was sitting across 2 burners, and she was swaying slightly to the music, and she had absolutely no idea I was standing right there. And neither did Mark, who was sitting at my kitchen table with his jacket off, his tie loosened, a glass of red wine in front of him at 12:47 on a Tuesday afternoon, watching her cook like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen in his life. He saw me first. The color drained from his face so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. He stood up so hard his chair scraped against the floor, and that's when she turned around. I will never forget her face in that moment. I want to be honest with you because this is a real story and real stories have complicated emotions. She looked terrified. Not guilty. Terrified. Like a person who had been caught, but also like a person who had somehow convinced herself the situation was something other than what it actually was. Nobody said anything for what felt like a very long time. Then I heard myself say, very quietly, "Is that my grandmother's casserole dish?" Not a question. A statement. Because I already knew. Mark started talking. Words came out of his mouth. I genuinely cannot tell you what they were, because there was a sound in my ears like static, like when a TV loses signal, and it just kept getting louder. I was looking at the dish. Rosemary chicken, it looked like. She had used the good olive oil, the one I keep in the cabinet above the stove for special occasions. There was a wooden spoon resting on my counter, not on the spoon rest, just directly on the counter, leaving an olive oil stain on the white quartz. She had put a wooden spoon directly on my white quartz counter. I picked up my purse. I turned around. I walked out of my own house, got back in my car, and drove to a parking lot 2 miles away and sat there for 4 hours. I need to tell you something before I go further. I have never told the story out loud. Not the whole thing. Not in this kind of detail. I've told pieces of it to my therapist. I've told sanitized versions to my sister. I have a few close friends who know the general shape of what happened. But I have never sat down and said all of it in sequence because saying it in sequence means living it in sequence, and that is a particular kind of pain. But I've been carrying this for 2 years now, and I think it's time. So let's keep going. His name at work was apparently the closer. Mark. The guy who flies into a territory and seals the deal and flies back out. He'd been with the company 11 years. He was good at his job, I'll give him that. He was charming and confident, and he knew how to make people feel like the most important person in the room. I had fallen for exactly that quality when I was 23 years old and met him at a friend's barbecue in Wicker Park. Her name was Kayla. She had been with the company 8 months when it started. She was a junior sales rep, fresh out of Northwestern, had moved to Chicago from Phoenix, didn't know many people in the city. Mark was her manager's manager. Not her direct supervisor. I want to be precise about this because it matters later, but several levels above her. I found out after the fact that it started at a work conference in Nashville in February. 8 months before I walked into my kitchen and found her at my stove. 8 months. That means it was happening in February, when we renewed our gym membership together and talked about getting healthy in our 40s. It was happening in April when we drove the kids to Wisconsin for spring break, and Mark held my hand in the car and said he was grateful for our life. It was happening in June when we went to Tyler's baseball tournament and Mark cried, when Tyler hit a double in the 7th inning. 8 months of a parallel life running alongside mine, and I had seen nothing. People always say that, right? I should have known. There were signs. I ignored them. And maybe there were signs. Maybe the slightly longer hours were a sign. Maybe the new habit of taking his phone into the bathroom was a sign. Maybe the way he started being slightly nicer to me, more considerate, more helpful around the house, which, I have since learned, is a thing. Apparently when people feel guilty they overcompensate. So his increased niceness was the sign I least expected to be a sign. But I didn't know. I just didn't know. Okay, real quick, before I get to the part where everything gets so much worse, I have to ask. Where are you listening from right now? Drop it in the comments. I love knowing where you all are. Whether you're on your commute, washing dishes, lying in bed unable to sleep, wherever you are, I see you. And if you are new here and this story is hitting you somewhere real, please subscribe. I share stories like this every week. Stories about real life, real pain, real women finding their way through. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming, because I promise you, this story is not over, and where it goes next, nobody saw coming. Okay, back to Naperville, Illinois. Back to the parking lot where I sat in my car for 4 hours. I didn't cry in that parking lot. I want you to know that. I think people expect the immediate ugly cry, the hyperventilating, the falling apart. But what I felt in those first hours was something much colder. It was a kind of clarity that I later described to my therapist as the feeling of a whole operating system crashing. Not dramatic, Not loud. Just everything going offline at once. Very still. Very quiet. I called my sister from that parking lot. I said, Diane, I need you to get your daughter to take the kids from school today and keep them overnight. She heard something in my voice that she said later scared her more than anything ever had. She didn't ask questions. She just said, done. I drove home at 5 o'clock. Mark was sitting on the couch. Kayla was gone. The kitchen had been cleaned, spotlessly cleaned, which made me angrier somehow, the erasure of it, and the casserole dish was washed and back in the cabinet. We talked for 6 hours that night. I'm not going to give you every word of that conversation because some of it is still too private and some of it is still too painful and some of it, honestly, is just too boring in the way that painful marital conversations are boring, repetitive and circular, and nobody says what they really mean. But I'll give you the pieces that matter. He said it had started as friendship. He said Kayla was lonely in the city, and he had taken her under his wing professionally, and it had evolved. He used the word evolved like it was something that happened to him, like weather, like something with no origin point and no decisions attached to it. I asked him if he loved her. He looked at the floor for a very long time. Then he said, I don't know. And that I don't know, was the thing that broke me. Not the affair. Not the woman in my kitchen. Not the apron. Not the casserole dish. Not the olive oil on my counter. The I don't know. Because it meant there was something real enough that he couldn't immediately say no. 14 years of marriage and 2 children and a golden retriever and a vegetable garden and Sunday dinners from scratch. And he couldn't say no. I don't love her, I love you. I asked him to leave that night. He did. The next 6 weeks were the worst of my life. I want to be honest about that without being dramatic about it. I functioned. I got the kids to school. I went to work 3 days a week. I fed the dog. I showered. But I was doing all of it from inside a thick glass box, separated from everything by this invisible wall of grief that I could not break through no matter how hard I tried. I didn't tell the kids right away. Mark and I agreed, one of the few things we agreed on, that we needed a minute before we sat them down. So for those first weeks he was traveling for work, which was a lie my children believed easily because it was a lie that had always been true. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Reeves. She had short gray hair, and she wore reading glasses that she was always taking on and off, and she had this way of asking questions that made you feel like you had come up with the answers yourself. She told me something in our second session that I have thought about almost every day since. She said, Sandra, grief is not linear and it is not logical. You will be fine at breakfast and destroyed by dinner, and that is not weakness. That is just the truth of it. She was right. I would be completely okay, making lunches, checking homework, watching TV. And then Maya would say something like Dad said he'd be home next weekend, and I would have to go stand in the bathroom for 10 minutes with the fan on, so nobody could hear me. Mark, meanwhile, had gotten an apartment in Oak Park. A 2-bedroom, which told me everything. A 1-bedroom would have meant temporary. 2 bedrooms meant he was planning for the kids to visit. 2 bedrooms meant he had already, in his mind, made a decision. But here's the thing. Here's where the story takes the first of its turns. 6 weeks after I threw him out, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I was making dinner, ironically a casserole, because apparently I am a masochist, and I almost let it go to voicemail. But I picked up. The voice on the other end was a woman's. Young. Shaky. And after a second I realized I knew the voice. It was Kayla. I almost hung up immediately. My hand moved toward the end call button, and then something stopped me. Maybe morbid curiosity. Maybe the fact that her voice sounded genuinely frightened. She said, Sandra, I know you have every reason to hang up on me, but I need to tell you something, and I think you need to know it. I said nothing, which she took as permission to continue. She told me that Mark had ended things with her. Not me. Not because of me finding them. He had ended things with her 2 weeks after I asked him to leave. He had walked away from both of us. He told Kayla that he had made a terrible mistake, that he loved his family, and that he needed to try to fix things with his wife. Here's the part she called to tell me. She was pregnant. 8 weeks. I sat down on my kitchen floor. I don't remember deciding to sit down. I was just suddenly on the floor with the phone in my hand and the casserole bubbling on the stove, and Kayla's voice coming through the speaker, saying my name over and over. She said Mark didn't know yet. She had found out 4 days ago. She had been trying to figure out how to tell him. She had called me first, and I still, to this day, am not entirely sure why. Maybe she thought I would tell him. Maybe she wanted someone else to know before she was alone in it. Maybe she was so scared that she had dialed the only other woman who was as tangled in this mess as she was. I said, "Kayla, why are you calling me?" She started crying. Real crying, not performing. And she said something that I have turned over in my mind probably 1,000 times since. She said, "Because I don't have anyone else. I moved here 8 months ago for this job and I don't have friends here and my mom is sick in Phoenix. And I made the worst decision of my life, and now I'm alone and pregnant, and I didn't know who else to call. And God help me, I felt something. I didn't want to feel it. I actively resisted it. This woman had been in my house. She had worn my apron. She had cooked in my grandmother's casserole dish. She had been sleeping with my husband for 8 months. I had every right to feel nothing for her but contempt. But she was 26 years old and alone and pregnant in a city she barely knew, and she had called me. I said, "Have you eaten today?" She said, "No." I said, "Okay." And then I said goodnight and hung up and sat on my kitchen floor for a very long time. I told Mark the next day. I called him directly, and I told him Kayla was pregnant. I want to be clear. I told him because he needed to know, not to help her, not to hurt him. He needed to know because there was a child involved and I am 40 years old, and I have 2 children of my own, and I understand what it means when a child needs their parent to know they exist. The silence on the other end of that call was the longest silence I have ever heard. Then Mark said, "Oh God." Not "Are you sure?" Not "That's not possible." Just "Oh God." Like a man watching something happen that he cannot stop. He called Kayla that day. They talked. I don't know the details of that conversation because they are not mine to know. What I know is what happened over the following weeks. Mark went back to Kayla. Not to me. To her. He made his choice. And honestly, and I mean this is not a brave face. By the time he made it, I had already started to understand that I didn't want him back. Not the man he had revealed himself to be. Not a man who could sit at a Tuesday lunch with a woman in my kitchen and watch her wear my apron and feel comfortable. Not a man who had looked at our entire life together and decided it wasn't enough. What I grieved was not Mark. Not really. What I grieved was the story I had been telling myself for 14 years. The one where I was building something permanent. The one where all those Sunday dinners meant what I thought they meant. That's a very specific kind of grief, and I don't think people talk about it enough. The grief of a version of yourself that turned out to be built on sand. I want to tell you about the following months because this is not a tragedy. I need you to hear that. Not because it all got magically better. It didn't. But because what happened next was something I never expected. I found myself, not in a cheesy way, not in a she cut her hair and traveled to Italy way, although I did get a very good haircut in January and I highly recommend it. I mean, I found the parts of myself that had gone quiet over 17 years of being Mark's wife, and Tyler and Maya's mom, and the woman who brought casseroles to people and never once asked what she needed. I started cooking again. Not for anyone else. For me. I would make elaborate things on Sunday afternoons, recipes I had bookmarked for years and never gotten to, and I would put on music and open a bottle of wine and take my time. And it was the first time, and I couldn't tell you how long, that I was in my own kitchen and I felt like myself. Tyler and Maya, my kids, were harder. The conversation we had with them in November was the hardest thing I have ever done, including burying both of my parents, including every hard thing. Watching your children's faces change when you tell them their family is not what they thought it was, there are no words for that. I held Tyler while he cried, and Tyler is 16 and does not cry, and I held him and I cried too, and I did not try to hide it because I think kids need to see that adults can fall apart and still be the person holding them together. Maya asked me, very quietly, if it was her fault. Kids do that. Therapists told me they do that. I held her face in my hands and I said, "Baby, your dad and I have a problem that is entirely between your dad and me, and it has nothing, absolutely nothing, to do with you or your brother, not one single thing." And I said it clearly, and I said it without crying, and then I went to the bathroom, and I cried so hard I had to run the shower, so she wouldn't hear. Now, I need to tell you about Kayla, because this is the part people don't expect. Kayla lost the baby at 11 weeks. I found out because Mark told me. He called. Not to get back together. Not to make any kind of move, just because I think he needed to tell someone who had known about it from the beginning and who he trusted, in some residual way, to handle information with care. He told me quietly, over the phone, that she had miscarried, that it had been hard, that she was okay, that they were still together. And I sat with that information for a long time. I didn't feel happy. I want to be very clear about that because I think people would expect me to feel some kind of vindication, some sense of justice. And I want to be honest, I didn't. I felt sad, not for Mark, but for that baby who never got a chance. And in some complicated corner of my heart, I couldn't fully explain for Kayla, who was 26 years old and had lost a pregnancy alone in a city she barely knew. Life is not a morality play. The bad thing happening to the person who hurt you does not actually make you feel better. That is a lie that stories tell you. The truth is that pain is pain and loss is loss, and it doesn't stop hurting because it happened to someone who deserved it. I texted Kayla. One text. I said I heard. I'm sorry for your loss. She didn't respond for 3 days. Then she sent back 2 words. Thank you. That was the last time we communicated. Here's where we are now. It's been 2 years. Mark and Kayla are still together, as far as I know. He sees the kids on alternating weekends and every other holiday, and he is, I'll give him this, a present father. He shows up. He remembers things. Whatever else he is trying to be a good dad, and for my children's sake I am grateful for that. My divorce was finalized in March of last year. I kept the house. It took some creative financial work, and I am still occasionally terrified by the mortgage, but I kept it. Because Tyler and Maya needed to come home to the same house. Because Biscuit knew every inch of that backyard. Because my grandmother's casserole dish was in that kitchen cabinet, and I was not going to let anyone take that kitchen from me. I went back to work full-time in January. I'm now the office manager at the pediatric practice, not just part-time admin. I got a raise and I negotiated it myself, and I cried in my car afterward because it was the first time in years I had asked for something and gotten it. I am in a new rhythm now. It's quieter than my old life. Saturday mornings are just mine. I can watch whatever I want on television. I can decide to go for a walk at 9 o'clock at night and nobody is waiting for me. These are small things. But small things are the texture of life, and the texture of mine feels, increasingly, like something I chose. I still go to Dr. Reeves twice a month. I still have nights, not as many, but they happen, where I sit in my quiet house and I feel the weight of what I lost and I let myself feel it because she taught me that the feeling is not the enemy. The enemy is pretending you don't feel it. Last month I made my grandmother's recipe. The real one. Rosemary chicken, the way she taught me, with the lemon and the white wine and the potatoes cut thick. I made it on a Sunday afternoon. I had music playing. Maya was home, and she sat at the kitchen counter, and we talked while I cooked. Not about anything important, just the low, good talk of a mother and daughter in a kitchen on a Sunday. And I put it in my grandmother's dish, the white ceramic one with the chipped handle and the scorch mark, and I put it in the oven. And when I pulled it out, Maya said, "Mom, that smells incredible." And I said, "Your great-grandmother taught me. Someday I'll teach you." And she said okay. And I stood there in my kitchen, with my music on my Sunday in my life. And something settled in me that I don't have a word for. Not happiness, exactly. Something quieter and more durable than happiness. Something like mine. I still have the casserole dish. I am not going to throw it away. Because my grandmother gave it to me, and it is mine, and whatever happened in this kitchen, whatever was cooked in it by whoever, this dish has my grandmother's hands in it. It has every Sunday dinner I ever made in it. It has the rosemary chicken I made with my daughter last month. Nobody gets to take that from me. Not the affair. Not the humiliation. Not the 2 years of rebuilding, everything from the floor up. Some things are just yours. And you don't have to give them up just because someone else touched them. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you aren't already. I put out a new story every week, and every one of them is real, and every one of them is for you. The one lying in bed at midnight, the one on the commute home, the one washing dishes and wondering if it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I promise you that.